Welcome to Alexa.net screencasts. So in this first screencast, we are going to look at setting up a skill that you can open and get a response back from, nothing else. So it's just going to be a simple hello world. We're going to use AWS Lambda for that, and we're going to go through the creation process and how you then publish the Lambda and get that Lambda to work with a new Alexa skill. So let's see how we do that. So my coding environment for the screencasts is going to be Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition, so it's free to download. The only thing I have added is the AWS Toolkit. This is a free download that Amazon provide, which add new projects and some useful functionality to work within the AWS environment. One of those new projects is the Lambda project. And we're not going to add tests today, it's just about getting something working with the skill. So we filled in the details and we have a new function class. If you're using a lot of AWS Lambda at the same time, please rename the function. We're not going to do that today because we've only got the one. But what you don't want is lots of function.cs files open because you'll very quickly lose track of what's what. Then we have to add Alexa.net as a NuGet package reference. So we'll do that and install the package. So now we've got the NuGet package reference, we can alter the function signature. So there are two primary objects that you have to deal with in terms of communication with a skill. You got the skill request, which is the JSON input sent from the Amazon system, and then the skill response, which is what we send back for the Amazon system to interpret and send to the devices to be able to produce some output. So those are the two that we're dealing with. I'm going to tidy up the function a little bit. Just get rid of the unwanted using statements and remove the comments. And then we're going to start looking at actually returning some data. So although we've got the skill request, we're not going to look at the data for that and this screencast. This is just about getting an initial setup done. What we are going to do is return a skill response though. The easiest way to do that is using the response builder class. This comes with a bunch of helper methods that are all based around the concept of ask and tell. And this is a common thing you'll see with a lot of the SDK examples from Amazon. And basically what we're saying is, if you're asking something, you're expecting the user to send a response back, so you're waiting for a voice prompt. Or if you're telling, then you're essentially saying that that's a statement and then you want the session to finish because the user's not going to say anything in return. Now, because this is a simple open and response, we're going to use the tell statement here. So we've generated the JSON output using Response Builder. Now we can publish the Lambda into our AWS account. So one of the advantages of using the Lambda project type is we get these new menus, and one of the options is publish. Most of the details are filled in. So you'll see method name, assembly name. Those details are put together on the Lambda to let it know what to execute when the Lambda is invoked. The only two details we need to give is one on the first screen, which it gives it a function name. We're just going to use hello world. And then on the second screen, you've got to give it some kind of permissions as to what it's allowed to do. I'm going to use the most basic role, which is to execute with CloudWatch permissions. CloudWatch allows you to generate logs, which is great to make sure that the request actually got invoked, especially when you're trying to figure out if Amazon sent you the request and you just errored. Also, by default, console.writeLine ends up in CloudWatch as well. So it's a quick way of getting some debug information out, figuring out what your skill's doing while the Alexa interactions are going on. So we fill those details in. We submit the Lambda and then we wait for it to be uploaded to the AWS environment. It's useful to know that on the screen that pops up when the function's finished uploading, you can actually pick from a big list of sample JSON inputs and test that the Lambda is going to respond the way you want. One of them is Alexa start session, which is really great. It's just what you're going to send when you open the skill from the Alexa IDE. So you click that option, you hit run, and then you see the JSON response on the right hand side. So as we can see, our function is returning a response, and so it's about getting that working inside the IDE, but we know it should work. So now we have our function published. There is one piece of information we need, which is the Lambda ARN or ARN from the Amazon website. The reason for this is that you need it as the piece of information to give to the Alexa skill, so it knows what to invoke when someone tries to interact with it. So we're just going to have to go into the AWS console, go to the Lambda section, go into our hello world function, and then there's a copy button next to the ARN, which means that it'll put that in our clipboard for us. So now we've got the Lambda ARN, we can go into the Alexa developer console. So go to developer.amazon.com, then go to the Alexa section and then the developer console option, and then we're going to create a new skill. The defaults are fine. We want a custom skill, we want it to be self-hosted. There are templates for skill types if you want to go with those. We're just going to go from scratch because we've already got the code that we want to run. So we're just going to whittle through all the defaults, and then we're going to start filling in the blanks for the new skill that we've created. So in the skill setup, the first thing we do is we go to the endpoint section, and this is where we get to say that we want to be able to run our Lambda when the skill is invoked. You'll see there's options for different regions. We're just going to use a default region. We're not worrying about latency of the Lambdas depending on what region we're in, but that's what they're there for. So we paste in the ARN, and then we try and get the skill to set up, and there's a problem. And that's because we haven't told the Lambda that we want the Alexa skill to be able to run it. So from this screen, you copy the skill ID, go back into the Lambda section of Amazon, add a new trigger, lots of different options, but we're looking for Alexa. And then as part of that, you can enable a skill ID reference so that only a particular skill can run the Lambda. It is recommended if you want the same code to run multiple skills, then actually it's probably better that you create multiple Lambdas and bind each one. That way, if something happens to one of your Lambdas, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, really. So once you've created that trigger, now we should be able to go back to the Alexa screen and carry on. Okay, the next thing I've had to do is I've had to go into the invocation name section. The reason for this is that I called it Hello World and I wasn't thinking. A skill must have an invocation name of at least 2 words, and it normally uses the name of the skill as the default invocation. So that's going to cause a problem. So I've just had to put a space in there, make sure it's at least 2 words, and now that should be fine as well. Now there's still a problem, which is that you can't run a skill without an intent, which is something you expect the user to say. I'm going to do intents in a later screencast. So for now, we're just going to put in the test intent, and an intent has to have a phrase that it's listening for. So again, we're just going to put the word in test. Like I say, there's plenty of documentation on intents, but we are going to do this at a later screencast. Right now, that should be the last thing that's stopping us from building the skill. And so what that does is that takes the intents and the phrases that it's looking for, builds a model that it can then deploy, and then starts building that up. The build is in 2 phases, so there's a quick build and a full build. We want to be able to test ours in the test tab of the IDE, so we're going to wait for the full build. Okay, so once the skill's built, you can then go to the test tab of the IDE, and then as you'll see, testing is off by default, and so you get to pick what environment you want to test on. We've only got development right now and we're not publishing this skill, so we're going to open up testing for development, And then you can use your microphone. I tend to want to type the words into the IDE, so we just say hello, open hello world, which is exactly the same as starting a sentence with the word echo or whatever your startup word is for your devices. And then it sends the JSON request over to our Lambda, which we can see on the left hand side. This is the JSON blob that's been sent to us. That's our skill request. And then our Lambda has responded with the text that we wanted, and therefore that is our skill response on the right. And there we go. That is a Lambda working with an Alexa skill. Okay, so we've got a Lambda wired up to a skill, but obviously that skill is not doing any of the required logic to actually interact with the user or even check why we're being invoked from the Alexa skill. So that's going to come in the next screencast, where we're going to start looking at intent types. But this just shows that you've got something that can work and that can interact with Amazon, and it's a good place to start from. So I will see you next time.